The focus on translation productivity has really proven to be a huge asset in the generative AI era.
And welcome everyone to Slator Pod. Great episode. Today we welcome Peter Reynolds. Peter is the CEO of memoQ, the translation productivity management technology out there. Hi Peter, and thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, Florian. I'm a big fan of the podcast, particularly the episodes with you and Esther talking about what's new in the industry. I love them. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. And now we're all ears about what you're going to tell us about memoQ and how you guys are integrating all that crazy technology that's out there now. But first, can I just ask you, where are you recording this from today? What part of the world?
I'm in Budapest, in the memoQ office here in Budapest. We've got 70 or 80 people working in this office, and it's a nice, beautiful building. It's a great place.
All right, Budapest. So you guys are fully back in office, or is it kind of hybrid, remote, and in person?
People come in, people like to meet people, and they come in regularly, but we don't legislate for it. Like I work from home. I work usually from Warsaw, Poland.
Got it. Yeah, we recently opened an office in London for, the 3 now soon 4 people that are working out of the UK. So it does have its advantages. All right, Peter, why don't we get started? Tell us a bit more about your background. It's been a long journey in the localization translation industry. You've covered a lot of things, so tell us more about that.
I started in the localization industry about 1995. I'd been doing social work type jobs beforehand. I decided I needed to change. I knew nothing about the localization industry, and I got a job in a company called Softtrans, which was probably the first company to specifically target software companies and call it localization. And they got bought by Berlitz, which got bought by BGS, which got bought by Linebridge, and they're still going in the same, more or less the same place. It was one of these cases for me. It was 11 years there where I sat in the same desk, and the plaque on the wall kept outside the office kept changing. While I was there, I was involved in quite a lot of interesting things. At one stage, various CEOs of companies in Dublin got a group of people together, and we came up with an interoperability tool called XLIF. And again, it's still going, and I'm still slightly involved. I'm still supporting them through, I helped them with the ISO version of that, but it's phenomenal that it's still going. We also, at Berlitz, came up with the first translation portal. We were working with Sistran, who had at the time Babelfish on the Alta Vista platform, which has taken you back an awful lot of time. And they were thinking that they get so much jobs to Babelfish that if they got 0.01% of that in human translation jobs, it would be a great business. But unfortunately, that was imagining things. There wasn't any 0.1%, but we still managed to create a great business. And by the time BGS was bought by Linebridge, it was a $24 million online translation business. And Linebridge still has that with Freeway and their cloud platform. It's descendant from this. So that was going from 1997. I worked for Idiom for a while. After I left Linebridge, which is based in Waltham, Massachusetts, I went to work for Idiom, which is based in Waltham, Massachusetts, and at the same time I stayed in Dublin. I worked there for a couple of years, which was very exciting. Eric Silberstein, the founder, had been to China during the Windows 95 localization project, and he saw that he was on the biggest localization project ever, and there was no effective management way for translation. And he came up with what he called the Globalization Management System, but we now call it Translation Management System, and that was a very exciting project. When that was taken over by RWS STL, Istvan Lengel approached me and said, look, we've got a couple of people here in Hungary who are building some exciting technologies. Let's talk. So I did, and 20 years later, I'm still here.
Fast forward, okay.
Yeah, that's been an exciting project. memoQ's got certain... Istvan, when he was talking to me first, was explaining that there's certain things that we do. One is to never develop anything that couldn't be explained to an expert within 3 sentences. Not to get involved in something that's just too complicated, whatever. Always to be focused on ensuring that the customer never loses their work, never goes more than a couple of hours without getting an answer and things like that. And that sort of approach, a highly customer-focused approach, has kept us going. At the time when Istvan was talking to me, there were 3 or 4 customers. Now it's a lot bigger, and it's the ethos of the company is very, very customer-focused, and also very focused on what really adds value in terms of technology.
Tell us a bit about the, maybe not in 3 sentences, but in a few more, kind of the key products, key users currently on memoQ. I mean, yeah, just outline a little bit what the tech does.
We work with about 45% of our customers are enterprises, and that's growing the fastest of any group. We've got about 40% LSPs. And that's been solid. Like when I started with memoQ, we saw that the LSPs they weren't really being serviced by the existing technology companies. We specifically went out to service them. We partly did this because we knew they'd be more, they'd have stronger opinions than, say, translators or enterprises. They'd really know what they wanted, and they weren't willing to let us get away with anything, and that was a good education. So we went for them very effectively. Unfortunately, our business model was also copied, and many of our competitors are now also servicing LSPs, which is good for the LSPs. And about 10% of our customers are freelance translators. But that said, a lot of the people using the tool are using it more, the translation productivity part of it is particularly strong. The tool's a translation management system. We have a lot of high-level productivity tools. I think we're the only tool in this space that actually spent a lot of time in recent years rewriting our translation memory engine. We're also the only tool with a corpus memory, and the corpus memory gives us a lot of power that other tools haven't. For example, with a corpus memory, you can use a monolingual document and still get good suggestions from that. And with the coming of generative AI, the approach that we've taken in the past has suddenly become exactly what we should have done. Like the year before generative AI, you might have thought, well, maybe memoQ should spend more time on having integrations with everything. We tried to have integrations with the core tools and have a business services team to be able to do the rest. But the focus on the translation productivity has really proven to be a huge asset in the generative AI era.
Yeah, I've been talking about generative. You guys launched something called memoQ AGT, memoQ Adaptive Generative Translation. So challenge to you, Peter, can you explain it in 3 sentences?
Before I explain it, I just tell you the story about this, because after ChatGPT was launched November 22, we had the same, wondering what this means for us. And we were listening to people, for example, that went on the Slator pod talking about what they were doing. And there was a lot of, the sky has fallen, and we have to completely rethink where we're coming from. And we were wondering whether that was true, whether the whole model for translation is going to be changed and whether it's going to be a completely different model. And then we came to the conclusion that maybe not, that maybe the core, we started experimenting with ChatGPT and found that by adding better contextual information, we could get the prompt to do far more powerful things. So what AGT, which stands for Adaptive Generative Translation, does is it takes a segment within memoQ, sends it to, we use Microsoft OpenAI LLM, it sends it to that with a lot of contextual information. And it says, here's the segment I'd like translated, here's previous translation memories, maybe here's some terminology information and so on. What this happens is that it doesn't necessarily have a huge gain in terms of quality between this and the state-of-the-art NMT engines. But what we found is that with just doing this enabled us to bypass the need for a custom engine. It was giving us the same power that you get if you've got an NMT engine that's been completely customized, but effectively the LLM was using what was in the translation memories and the suggestions in a very powerful way that, it meant we didn't have to have a style guide because it was already there. If you've translated for this customer in the past, you've done things in a way that matches their style guide. And it was like producing a custom engine with, just by clicking a button. And that was not possible until LLMs happened. Just for your information, as an example of this, we have a customer in Canada called Nations, which are quite an interesting company because they're owned by native Canadians, indigenous people. And it's also a very up-and-coming translation company. They have told us that they have saved $1 million since they started using AGT and claimed productivity of 55%. And HubSpot have also been good enough to allow us to have a case study on the memoQ website about how they use AGT. So it's been very exciting and we've seen a lot of power come from this.
It also highlights probably how important it is to have a clean translation memory, wouldn't it? Like if you have a lot of random, for lack of a better term, like random linguists putting all kinds of stuff into the translation memory, that would influence it, I guess, a little bit. So you have to take care to clean it.
This is one of the things with not just in translation, but you're seeing it in other areas where AGT is helping, that the augmented part of it is very, very powerful. And if the way to do this, as I see, is to have the best linguist you can get. It's not, the linguist will probably have to do a lot less work. But if, for example, you decide to go with people that don't, they're inexperienced, they don't know how to do this, and they're not as skilled as a top quality linguist, you will have problems. And that seems to be also the case with development, with coders that are using LLMs.
Yeah, all these new tools, right, that are out there that are clogging up my Twitter feed.
You need to be knowledgeable and experienced to really get the full power from them. It's not, there will obviously be some simple, gains, whatever, but the real gains are when knowledgeable people use them.
Yeah, we've tried to shift the terminology to expert in the loop away from human in the loop because of exactly this, because it's like you have to be an expert in various domains to be able to leverage these tools. It's not easy.
That was the approach that one of the things that this company Nations did is exactly that. Why they were thinking they did so well with it was because of their process, the fact that they had these highly professional linguists who really knew what they were doing, managing it. And I think what you're saying is exactly right.
So how does the acquisition of Globalese fit into this or not? I think you called it a developer of a platform for training AI translation models. Like, was this part of it, or was this come after HET, or?
It came after HET, but Globalese is a German headquartered company. The people involved in developing it came from a Hungarian company called Morphologic, which is also where memoQ comes from. So there was a lot of in-depth knowledge of what they were doing. They developed a number of different technologies. One was the ability to have an on-premise NMT engine. And unlike some other companies that have an on-premise, when they can train the engine on-premise, so it's really highly secure and highly excellent for the enterprise thing. We were very lucky to be able to acquire them because the people there are just excellent. Like, we had a lot of clever people within memoQ who were experts on technology, who were looking at everything with AI. But with Globalese, we upped that considerably, and they also have the research approach, partly coming originally from Morphologic. It was very much a research company led by Professor Bruschecki. And that's been excellent for us. And we integrated this into memoQ very quickly. We see it as complementary. We see that certain companies will need a complete enterprise solution. Globalese has a hybrid solution where it uses NMT with an LLM, and that's a very powerful thing. And they're putting a lot of work into where that goes. Like, our approach to AI has been, we don't really care about the new shiny things. Obviously, when competitors have something, we look at what it is and try to see whether this could be of value to our customers. But we're trying to focus on how this adds real value. And the Globalese team are currently putting a lot of work into looking at LLMs, how they can be improved, how it can offer more in terms of high quality translation. And I think it's very exciting. We were delighted to be able to acquire them. And also because of there was a big cultural matching there, and they quickly joined, were able to join the company and generate a lot of excitement for what they're doing.
Now, like, the public perception out there basically now is that AI, whatever that is, like LLMs or these various models that are out there, just do machine translation. They just do AI translation, right? And what you laid out now with Globalese and what memoQ is doing, it's obviously a lot more nuanced. Does that kind of public perception, that narrative, does it influence you at all? Does it influence your customers, the kind of conversations you have with new leads, that basically, hey, AI is here, it's kind of perfect out of the box? And how does that influence the way you talk to clients and leads?
Most of the people that we talk to are extremely well educated as far as translation technology is concerned, AI is concerned, and they don't expect miracles. We do occasionally, we've seen that, not just ourselves, but with the whole industry, that 2024 was probably a bad year for the translation industry for two reasons. One is that somebody high up in a company or in the company's board expected AI to just do it, and they didn't want to pay for translation services or translation technology. And the other thing that was happening is that an enterprise might decide they have a budget of $1 million for technology. They didn't increase that with AI, they just allocated 20% of it. So the budget was reduced for every other sort of technology out there. But I think we're past that stage, and I think 2024 was probably a bad year for our industry because of that, but we're past that, and we're already seeing a 15% increase in January 25 compared to January 24. My impression is that the people that we're talking to are very knowledgeable, and they don't, it may be that there's somebody in the company who believes that translation is just going to be done by AI, but the people that are actually doing it don't believe that.
So what are some of the maybe key features that you've been seeing being requested maybe over the past 6 to 12 months? Anything new or anything that's particularly interesting?
They want us to really, the clear message that we're getting from customers is they want us to embrace this. They want us to really get value from what's happening with the LLMs and to do that as fast as we can. The memoQ process for dealing with new functionality is quite interesting. To give you an example, we had a request for somebody that said, wouldn't it be possible in the find and replace in memoQ to be able to say what you didn't want? And then when they put this onto our ideas portal, other people said, well, you can actually do that with regex. And the person that had put in the original request said, you can do that with regex, but I certainly cannot. So instead of doing what they had suggested, after the product managers talked to that person and talked to other people, and they developed a simpler way to do regex within memoQ. And that's an example of the approach that we have. We spend an awful lot of time talking with people. We've had we often have quite senior people just come from our customers, companies just come in here and spend a day in our office just talking to developers and product managers about how they do it. We put a huge value on domain experience. We also really have really embraced Agile, and at the beginning of this, everybody talks about things like Scrum and whatever, but for me, what I see as evidence of an Agile is weekly or bi-weekly developer meetings where they're just showing what they're doing, and they don't show anything unless it's ready, it's close to being released. And that's changed the whole ethos in the company, and there's a lot of things that we're doing that are coming out soon. An example of an area where memoQ got hammered was the web transversion. Like, there was a post in LinkedIn describing memoQ like an Audi car, and other cars were not so attractive. But then somebody wrote it, "No, it's like a broken bicycle." And you could tell somebody that's writing that sort of negative comment is using the web trans interface, which wasn't as good as it could be. In the next month, we'll be releasing a new version, which is much more powerful. We also, because we've completely rewritten our browser interface, there's no there's always technical debt, but there's much less technical debt than any of our competitors' tools. And we think we've got something very exciting in the next couple of months that we're going to release with the new user interface.
Sounds great. Sounds exciting. We'll look forward to it. So can you talk a bit about how much that's going through your platform, your systems, is like still non-machine translation, like the classic, like you have a match, you have a fuzzy match, and what is just like post editing of whatever's coming out? Is that even a thing you can quantify anymore at this point, or is it all
I think
blending?
It's not a thing you can quantify anymore. And at this stage, every translator is using some sort of machine translation engine, whether they use memoQ AGT or whether they use DeepL or anything. They're not just using their translation memories. And it's a case that they will prefer their translation memories, but usually they start by pre-translating a document, where if they've got good matches, they'll use them, and if not, they'll use machine translation. So the model is quite like post-editing, but they don't. I think they no longer call it post-editing. They usually just call it translating because it's been done by a translator. And again, that's the secret sauce here is a really good linguist does all this sort of thing faster. And speed is the essence. And that's what we're seeing, that most people using our tool do use machine translation engines.
So it's essentially, we've kind of hit like almost 100% adoption, right? Because I remember like a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, people were saying, oh, we're like at 50%, 60%. And now we can say, I mean, everything's so integrated that you couldn't quantify it anymore. And if you did, it's like, okay, almost everything has been touched by AI, as it were, before the expert layer.
Exactly. And everything is using either NMT or an LLM, and they're both AI.
Let's talk about the LSPs. You said it's roughly 40% of the user base. So what are some of the key pain points they have at the moment? Like what's filtering down from the client through the LSPs through you?
There's been a lot of. I think last year was a difficult year for most LSPs. They were finding it. Basically, they were under a lot of pressure, and there's a mixture of LSPs. To me, there seems to be that there's a lot. At the top of the group of LSPs, there's companies like RWS and Transperfect and so on. But then there's a new group of companies below that are very, very clever, with how they're approaching technology, how they're approaching business, and it's becoming very, very competitive. I think the most exciting thing with the LSPs that we're working for is because last year, the recent years have been difficult, they've become better at how to run their business and how to work with technologies. And I think that's quite exciting. Like companies like Token are very clever with how they use technologies, big language or similarly thinking outside the box. I've mentioned Nations. I could go on with many, many companies that are coming up with clever ways to it, and they're very open to new technologies, to new processes and whatever. That's quite exciting. Like a few years ago, it would have been much more traditional, and it's not obvious that obviously the big companies like Transperfect and RWS want to keep their position, but they all know they have to innovate. And they're putting a lot of work into it. And again, this is an exciting thing. Like, you don't want to compete in a world where you're the best and nobody else is coming to you. That'll be incredibly boring. Like, we're lucky in that our competitors are actually good and try to do something useful, because it makes life much more interesting to compete against good competitors, and it's better for the customer.
Certainly not boring. What are you hearing from the translators? Like, where their challenges, and where do you see that niche for these expert translators? Do you have any data on that? Like, which kind of areas, which maybe verticals, which text types are kind of holding up quite well in terms of having that expert layer still?
In 23, when I went to Localization World in Malmo, and that was depressing. All these people were going around the place saying that, they didn't, they were looking at new shiny things and trying to figure out what it all meant. And the basic idea, though, was the sky was falling in and we didn't know what to do. A couple of months later, I went to the ATA, and the translator said to me, well, this is a new technology. I don't understand it, but I've done this before. This is what we did with NMT, and what I'm going to do is that Jay Marciano was giving a talk during this presentation. Their angle was they were going to listen to him, figure out what he was saying, and take some good advice. And that's quite a refreshing approach, I think, to instead of looking at it's happened, it's going to happen. You have to adapt it. And I think the translators that are succeeding are the ones that are doing that. I think they have to be more and more specialized. I think that's the crucial thing. And there is a difficulty, not just with translators, but with coders and whatever. If that the best translators are the ones that are really expert, that can use generative AI-based technology, how do you get to that level? Like, how do you go from being a student translator to being somebody that's a very experienced linguist? And same is true for developers. Like, how does the whole, in the past there was an approach of having junior developers, but now you can run a company with senior developers with the generative AI tools.
Actually, as you're very deep in development, obviously, is that analogy kind of translation, like translator and AI and developer and AI? Does that make sense? Are there similar dynamics? Like, because I go on X and I see all these people posting. I don't know. There's like Cursor and all these new technologies out there that are apparently turbocharging developers. Is that the same analogy, like translator and AI?
It's similar. Like, we're a Microsoft house, so we've been using Microsoft technology. So we're not, and Microsoft are very, they've been developing cutting edge tools for the developers, and we're trying to use them. I think it's somewhat similar. I think writing, translation, development, there are jobs where the generative AI is augmenting the skills of the people, and it's not a replacement. I think there are other areas where, in a couple of years, generative AI could replace people, and it's not as obvious as it was. Like, when ChatGPT came out, people were thinking, oh, this is the end of translation as we know it. But at the moment, it looks like it's far more threatening for project management than for translation.
I mean, it is interesting that it's been around for 2.5 years, right? ChatGPT, or maybe more. And I mean, like, we're still here. I mean, there's a certain just reality to it that we're still here. I mean, we being like the language industry, not every problem has been solved, and pockets of demand are coming up that just weren't there 2.5 years ago, especially in anything kind of multimedia, multimodal, voice, etc. So yeah.
One of the things that has happened since then is that OpenAI and Anthropic and all these other companies have all signed contracts with LSPs. They've all started. So again, and there was a customer of ours, Scott Bass, who runs a translation company based in New York State. He tried to send it was a European Union patents regulation to ChatGPT. This was about 9 months ago, so it is well outdated at this stage. But what ChatGPT did is translated the first 3 paragraphs, then stopped, and he asked it, why did you stop? And he said, the ChatGPT came back and said, look, this is a highly technical document that should be translated by a professional translator. And it also suggests that the tools available for translation are better for this type of document than ChatGPT is, because the likelihood that if it gets something wrong at the beginning, it could keep the mistake through it. And that's quite an interesting response from the technology itself.
That is very self-aware, knowing its limits, right? Let's see if the 4.5 that's being teased right now is replying in the same way.
I think an awful lot of people have got their ideas of what AI could do and how dangerous it is from, say, the 1968 film 2001: A Space Odyssey, where in order to try to stop the computer finding out what they're saying, they turn off the communications. But the computer just lip read and found out exactly what they were saying and then locked them outside the ship when they were trying to repair something. So it's quite, that's fiction.
We don't want to be the Dave. We don't want to be the Dave.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about gaming. I think you guys have been historically very strong in gaming. So how is that area developing?
It's still developing. It's not historic. We are very strong in gaming. Gaming's been one of the areas where memoQ have had, big name customers who've been willing to tell us how to improve their process, and we've constantly done that. We're very specialized in the gaming industry. We go to gaming conferences to find out what's new with that. I think gaming is one of the core things we do. It's also quite interesting because gaming, it's a premium translation service. Well, the language that's being used may be a lot different to, say, the language for a medical device or something. The language has to be in a certain sort of way, in a certain way for the customers of the gaming companies to use it. And gaming also has to be fast. If a gaming company doesn't have its content translated, within a couple of days, the users will be using the the English version or whatever. Yeah, exactly. And there has been examples like that. And they very much want to control the content. So it's been a very exciting area for us. We're growing in this area. We've put a lot of work into it. There's a lot of partners that also work into it. And we've got a lot of some great translators who are working in the gaming area, are memoQ translators.
Unlike many others in this space, you're not completely just web-based. You offer an on-premise version as well. Like, what type of clients in 2025 require on-prem, and why?
On-premise is the bigger issue. Like, one of the exciting things with Globalese is they've got an on-premise version. And what it's about is about security and scalability and the ability to... Look, we have clients that don't want any content to go outside their premises. They're using on-premise LLMs, they're using on-premise TMS, on-premise machine translation. And in companies and sectors like banking, life science, this is very important. And it's those sort of customers where it's high security. Security is a hugely important topic to us, and we can see it becoming more and more important. Like, we're trying at the moment to achieve sub 2 level security. We will be going for that in the next year and getting that certified and having both the ISO security certification and sub 2. It's very, very important. Scalability and security are very important, and that's the benefit of on-premise.
Hey, one couple more ideas I want to run by you. So one is this like multilingual content generation from scratch, right? From zero. Like, you have an idea, you have a prompt, and then you say, write this thing in 15 languages. Is maybe going to eat a little bit into the translation pie. But it's been a theory out there for 2.5, 3 years since ChatGPT came out. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see any demand for this, or like this just kind of just an idea and it's always going to be one?
It's always been possible. It's always been possible to write a brief, send it to all the local offices, and have different contents. But it's also always been the case that the marketing manager or whoever in the the head in the original country wants to manage what is going into the message and whatever. This is the issue. Many marketing managers are far happier when they have written the source language content and they control it, and that's the reason why this hasn't happened. Because ChatGPT just made it faster. It hasn't. It's always been possible to do this, and some companies had something like this. Like many of the companies with gas stations all over the world, like Exxon, would have had different content in different countries, and it would have approached it that way, but that was always rare.
So it's kind of an edge case, and it hasn't broken through, and it would have if there had been a major need. So I guess we'll watch that space. Hey, another question is, so to close on that, so memoQ, if I'm correct, never raised outside capital, which is very, very different from almost everybody else in the space. So like, what's the backstory there? And like,
sell our product to customers, we make money, and we've been an investor. We were lucky enough to have an idea for Mark Schreiner, whom I believe you worked with many years ago. We had the pleasure of his company for a couple of years, and it was great. And one of the things we asked him to do was to fix how we manage RFPs within the company, and he brought in a wonderful woman whom I also believe that you work with, Amy, and he also brought in a process, and we at the time used memoQ to ensure that we just had to answer the same question once. But we were very lucky to work with him to turn, to create a startup, Restocks, and we were a seed investor with that, and now they're at a stage where they're winning new business. It's an exciting company, and that. So we've been an investor, and we also managed to. Globalese was bought from funds that we had, and again, it was an acquisition that we're very happy to make. We talked to private equity companies, so we've learned a lot from them, and it's a pleasure to talk with them because some of them come up with ideas that we don't expect and whatever. And they've also, I think, brought in a lot to the industry that I think's been positive. I mentioned before that we want to compete with people that are competent and whatever. And I think Georg Gell at Phrase and Brian Murphy at Smartling are people that I like to compete with. I think I'd learn from them. I think bringing the money that's come into to the industry has been quite useful for the industry. It's something we're not against. We just haven't had to do it. Our criteria is that we're very customer focused. If we feel that this will benefit our customers, we'd probably do it. And it's an interesting thing with like one of the examples that I give to people within memoQ being customer focused is what happened at Apple in 1997 when Steve Jobs came back as interim CEO. Like he turned it from, it was very shareholder focused before that. Like they were taking Microsoft to court over something, infringements of something, and they were trying to do deals with IBM. And he completely changed that. Instead of suing Microsoft, he had a commitment from them to be an investor in the company and put their software on Macs. And instead of going with what sounded good in the corporate level, like deals with IBM about new software. He brought in Johnny Ives Johnny Ives was already there, but Johnny Ives was given permission to develop some very cool looking pieces of equipment. And the whole approach was customer focused, and that produced the greatest benefit for shareholders ever. And I think that's what a business is. There was a quote from Peter Drucker that probably a good quote to end it on, and that's the purpose of a business is to create a customer. And because of this, it's got two functions and two functions only, and they're innovation and marketing. He said that in 1950. I wrote that in 1954, and it's still true 70 years later.
I don't want to end it on this. I want to ask you one last question. So what are you planning to help your customers with in 2025? You mentioned that the web, the web-based, what do you call it?
Essentially, we've a new browser editor, and that's quite exciting because it's a very the user interface for this is very exciting. We think it offers a lot of value. We have spent the last year working with customers, making sure that it's what they want. We're looking at things like one of the big areas of research that we're doing at the moment is bigger segments. What happens when it's paragraph or documents or whatever. This is an area of great excitement within the development team at memoQ. I think there's a lot to be gained from this.
If you manage to do that, I will personally sign up and try it because I'm a former translator. I'm like, if we finally get out of that sentence paradigm, I'm going to do a bit of translation again.
Excellent. So, get your dictionaries and whatever already, and we'll set them. But it's an area of research. It's not at the stage where we can promise anything yet. It's an area of research within the company, particularly around the Globalese team are working on this. We're also working on how to. We spend an awful lot of time experimenting and playing with LLMs of different types to try to get the best. That's a big issue because we want to be able to. The on-premise thing is an issue. We want to be able to have on-premise hybrid solutions with NMT and LLMs on-premise for customers that are very highly secure. We're working a lot faster. memoQ Fest, we'll hopefully got some things that will happen in the middle of May, and we hope to be at that stage to be able to showing some of these things to the audience there.
Sounds great. And the middle of May is just enough to fly to London and meet us at SlatorCon London at the end of May on the 23rd. So, all right, Peter, this was super interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Florian.